Um, so I will call us to order, and I think in lieu of a roll call, we can just state that currently present Ned Galloway, Alice Fletcher, and Kim Highland, along with our staff from the PDC. And who will read the notice of electronic meeting?
That will be me. One moment. This meeting of the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership is being held pursuant to Code of Virginia subsection C of 2.2-3708.3, which allows a public body to hold an all virtual public meeting. The meeting is being held via electronic video and audio means through Zoom online meetings and is accessible to the public. The method for holding this meeting shall not change unless a new meeting notice is provided. Should the electronic transmission fail, you may reach out to the TJPDC at remrick@tjpdc.org. Notice has been provided to the public through notice at the TJPDC offices to the media website posting and agenda. The meeting is held pursuant to the remote electronic participation in all virtual meeting policy as adopted by the Commission on August 7, 2025. The meeting minutes will reflect that the meeting was held by electronic communication means and the type of electronic communication means by which the meeting was held. A recording of the meeting will be posted at the website www.tjpc.org within 10 days of the meeting. All done.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, I know on Zoom, um, per state code now, for us to be active with our quorum, we do have to have the cameras on, and when we vote. And since there are four of us, that is our quorum, right? Do I got it right?
That's correct.
So if you're, just as a reminder for that.
I
You
was
know, one
trying to
day there,
I was trying to save you from me eating my lunch.
I know I was like, yep, I get it. Like, leave the screen and leave your shoulder in there.
Yeah,
Someday the
sorry.
General Assembly is going to decide that, you know what, it's just easier to allow electronic meetings. And there's really no like hidden evil to us doing it this way. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that maybe it'll get a little bit easier to do this, especially for these kind of groups, moving forward. All right, I'm sorry. Let me get my agenda back in front of me. Too many screens going. Next item, public comment. I do not see anyone lined in from the public, logged in from the public. Ruth, have we received or Logan received anything that we need to acknowledge?
No.
All right, great. We will close public comment on the consent agenda, where the minutes of the October 22nd, 25 executive committee meeting and the monthly financial update. I'll first call to staff. Any comments you all feel compelled to make on the financials?
I don't think so. It's about where we would expect for the spending, considering that a good chunk of it was spent on the AmeriCorps Vista host site fee.
Great. And I'll call for everyone, any edits or adjustments needed for the minutes. All right, if one of the voting members would please make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
And is there a second?
I'll second it.
Very good. Motion's been made and seconded. All our mics are unmuted. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? All right, that is approved. Thank you. And we can skip 4. We're not doing any presentations today, but we do have item number 5, new business, membership engagement discussion and strategic planning. And then that will be followed up by a brief conversation on leadership succession discussion. So I'll start us off with, or Logan, do you want to make any opening comments on the membership engagement discussion and strategic planning?
Well, if it's helpful, I can pull up a few slides about what the current sort of strategic plan goals are and run through that briefly. Mostly the idea here is to, chart a way forward that either, explicitly addresses some of these goals or goes in a new direction. The idea being, I just want to hear from all y'all on your various thoughts and yeah, how we can more effectively plan, but mostly how can we more effectively, represent what you all want to do more directly within the RHP. So I can bring up those slides, or y'all can just sort of go, but up to you.
Well, I'll just add to it that in the past, of course, we looked at bylaws and did bylaws changes. We have come out of it a few strategic plans ago with some studies and work with some consultants to help us figure out the organizational layers, or if you would, or the structure of what we're going to be. So I know that staff is often interested in where we're going strategic plan wise, because this kind of informs their work plan, if you will, how staff resources are going to be programmed, what they need to do to support, et cetera, and that impacts those financial resources, et cetera. I think that in my opinion, it is the fact that membership engagement, I think, should be our target, in my opinion, for strategic planning. But it's always been my view that you can't really get after engagement without looking at what the purposes are of the body, because that should drive the engagement, if that makes sense. I know that in the fall we discussed the advisory committee and what we're trying to do with that. And then I also know coming out of December that I heard great feedback for those who were able to attend the December full partnership meeting, that they really enjoyed the content, and thought that was worthwhile use of partnership time moving forward. So I know that we also have some stuff scheduled like that coming in March along the similar, hey, Margaret, had that scheduled in similar fashion to what we did with the last couple of partnership meetings. So I'll stop there and then just ask and look, this is no judgment, just throwing it out, what we should be focused on. As I don't think we need to go to a consultant, any of that stuff. I think this all can be driven from the executive committee. So I'll stop now and hear your thoughts.
Can I ask, there was a survey, I believe that Emily had sent out. Have we seen the results of that in terms of what the topics are that the committee would like to discuss?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. The survey got 8 responses, so not super thorough feedback, but I think enough to be able to pull some ideas. Generally, the results were that people liked the direction that we've been going in of hosting events like the Housing Summit, bringing in speakers. There's also some interest in the RHP doing grant research. Outside of that, for specific projects, it's a bit varied. The only real consistent interest was research on a land bank, but that might have been because it was the example project in the question. So it was a little bit more front of mind. Yeah, I'm happy to send out the results that we've gotten so far, or we can wait and see if we get more responses.
I think sending out what we have so far to the executive committee is a good idea. I mentioned to Emily when we met for pre-agenda that doing a survey right in December and then coming into the new year is not a great time. So it takes a little bit of push to try to get some more feedback. So I think we'll do another round of that. I think we did that, 2 weeks ago, Emily, was the last round. So we can do another call as we're going to the March full partnership meeting.
I would like to see the slides that Logan has to kind of give us some.
All right. These
direction.
Yep, I can pull these up. I'm not gonna really give a whole lot of spiel, but I want them to be there to give us something to like push back on. If I can share my screen. And I always struggle with actually putting these in like a presentation mode. So give me 1 second and shout out advice if you have it. All right,
Yeah.
can y'all see that?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, so I'll just give a so sort of four overarching goals of the previous strategic plan, which again uh, ran through the end of the calendar year in 2025. But basically, overall, sort of four main goals. This one, as you can read, is more focused on the engaging sort of stakeholders piece, which may be more of the focus of what we talk about today. I don't know how to change slides. Oh, there it goes. Other key piece being the education, advocacy arm, sort of the spreading of awareness about housing issues in our region, things along the line of the dashboard previously constructed. This is more so about the regional engagement of the events, messaging, with a wider swath of folks beyond the partnership as it stands. And then this is more internal to, helping the RHP run smoothly internally. So I'm happy to dwell on any of these and have people take a longer look at them.
Could you just go back to goal 3 real quick, Logan? That one flew by kind of quick.
Sorry. And at the end, I have a list of sort of the ongoing elements that fit into one or multiple of these goals. Things like the housing study that people can look at as well.
And you said that's an additional slide, or that you're just calling that out?
Yeah, right here. So these are just to sort of ground people in what's going on and what, compare it to what the goals are.
And I believe we're getting an update on the housing study, right, at the end.
Yes, I believe Lord Jean is here and she can give us a brief update on that front. But yeah, these are sort of the main things we're working on, and I think to varying degrees these implicate the membership. The housing study more is obviously that's being contracted out. Things like the webinar series, those are going to more sort of bring this group in and for sort of direct participation, I guess. We've had the webinar series being birthed out of the and related to the presentations in the meetings that we've had. So we have another scheduled for March. Things like that seem to have engaged the membership well. So are there, I don't know, just to get things rolling, are there things along those lines that maybe align with some of these goals here that aren't represented in these slides that, you all have been thinking about or would like to buttress with some additional information?
I'm sorry, I was late and I don't usually attend these anymore since I'm not really on the committee. I'm just an extra in case. What's the context of going to this? Because you're talking about doing another one because we reached the end of this strategic plan and we want to kind of extend it, or
Yeah. Yep, that's basically it. The previous plan, was a 4-year plan, I believe, and I mean a lot of the goals are still very much consistent, and we talked about this in the fall briefly. But just in terms of actionable things, these goals are here to basically give sort of lines in the sand about what this
like
group,
a roadmap of what
generally how we operate,
yes.
what we aspire to be, but there's plenty of room, obviously, underneath that umbrella to do different things. And so one of those things was in the last kind of year or so, we've started having more of those presentations in the actual meetings. That's just an example, but that was sort of birthed probably out of this previous process. We're just, yeah, to reiterate what Ned's point, we're not gonna, the plan is not as of this moment to rehire a new consultant to do a whole another plan. It's to tweak what we already have. And so this is what we already have.
Right, right. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to, derail the conversation or have you guys listen to it twice. I'm sorry about that. But I would say that the presentations on those and the member meetings, we were doing lunch and learns before we have the actual in-person event. And I think all of those do engage the membership, because if there's not, and I think Kim can say this better than I can say it, but if there's not really a reason for us to engage, we tend to stay in our silos. And that may be why some of the, participation has gone down, like you only get 8 responses or whatever. People aren't seeing, because they're really busy, the value in it. They need to be told what the value is. And those public kind of events are, opportunities to show what the RHP, and also the study. Oh my God. I mean, that is just fabulous. I'm so excited about that. I'm just bursting at the seams.
I want to hear about the study as well. So I think that might help us steer it as well if we could hear from Lori Jean and what's going on with that, because yeah, equally as excited in how we're going to use the results from that and what the time frame is.
Is Lori Jean there, ready to? Oh, I see your face. Hello.
Yeah, sorry, I was just kind of taking a moment to adjust. Um, yes, yeah, I would love to give an update. So we're mostly on time. Some of the federal changes have meant about a month delay on getting some of the data that VCHR is using to do the quantitative analysis. But we are still anticipating the initial needs assessment report, really, really rough first draft, by end of March, possibly end of April, again, due to that delay at the federal level. Um, and in the moment, we are preparing to begin the strategies portion around that same time, working with Housing Forward Virginia. And so Jonathan and his team from Housing Forward Virginia will be working closely with us and with each locality to map out and to really drill down. So he's been involved through the whole process and is, going to have read the first draft of the needs assessment. But he's also been in a ton of the meetings, and his staff have all of the qualitative information that we've gathered. So he's already working with his team on kind of developing that initial menu of strategies for each locality and for us as a region. And then we'll be working with those come April with him. Um, so yeah, I do think it's a good point that we're going to have a lot of new data, we're going to have a lot of new information, and we're going to have these resources in VCHR and in Housing Forward Virginia who are available to us to help shape, yeah, we want to engage stakeholders around a shared regional vision. We are mapping out what that vision will look like, right? I mean, I think all of these different goals and strategies looking at when was this? I think this is from 2021, right?
2022, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when it started. Yeah, and kind of hone in, there was a pretty heavy educational focus in this 25, 22 to 25 strategic plan, and kind of looking at, what has or hasn't shifted in these recent years, and kind of what focus the RHP wants to have based on what our regional and locality strategies end up being. I think there will be lots of opportunities to engage with that. At the moment, we don't have the final data, so um, I will be back to you guys in March about that too. Do you
I
guys
think
have any specific questions that I maybe didn't answer though?
no, I think that's helpful though in steering us from education into implementation. I mean, we don't have you like you said, we don't have the data yet, but
Yep.
knowing when it's coming and when we'll be able to analyze it gives us some guidelines for next phase, which really hopefully the CVRHP is prepared for implementation of more of those ideas now. Because yeah, we've been in education mode. I think that's accurate.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, part of taking, am I unmuted? Part about taking on, because this is the prior strategic plan, is we could change strategies. We don't have to stick. I mean, we could on our own. We don't need a consultant to go, all right, we've kind of accomplished one or two of these. We can substitute in some bullet points. We don't have to stick to what's written on these slides. Go back to goal 1, Logan, if you wouldn't mind.
Yep, 1 second.
Like we're starting to get there with the research and collate a list of resources with the library that we've been getting up and running this past 9 months, going on a year. But then it's a matter of how robust is it. So it's like that's one I think we should continue, but doesn't necessarily have to be the focus coming out of here. That's our number one priority. The feasibility study for a regional land bank, we've not got off the ground. But I guess my question here would be if anybody thinks there's any additional bullets here that maybe are new that we could add in addition to what we've heard so far.
Just to add one thing too about the resources bit, that's very much like an engagement piece, that's asking folks to contribute and, similar to maybe people showing up at the meetings, there has to probably be some sort of, it's also not in people's general habit just to send random stuff to me, or whatever that they come across during their day. So, that might be one where there is a, we have to do some doodling about, what are the ways in which we can encourage people to engage in that way in the RHP. And it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you get it to work, it encourages more people to do it, but sort of helping that along. That's just one thought.
I would add to that, Logan, is beyond the engagement of getting folks to share resources, I think the collating of those resources is only as valuable as people are using them.
Yeah.
If it is a place that people turn to and it is the go-to for information, research, all of those things, then it continues to add value, then it should be worth the investment in staff time to do it. But if it is not somewhere that people will consider going as their first stop shop, then it does beg the question of does it add enough value for the time investment?
All right. Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't. I think it begs that question, is making sure we are asking ourselves, is it being used?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And forgive me, I'm relatively new to the executive committee, and maybe this exists, but would it be helpful to list some of the actionable goals from the previous strategic plan and how we specifically met them, so that we have kind of a starting point to then build upon that? As opposed, maybe it exists already, but I think it would be helpful to set a grounding of, what those strategic goals were, how we met them, how we did, and how they still need some work, and add a few new goals to that. Because
Yeah,
as
I
you
was-
mentioned, a lot of these are continuous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Alice, to that point, I was envisioning that the strategic plan update would do exactly that. It would list out what we did and what we're still doing, and maybe what we're going to do as well.
Yeah.
And when I did my strategic plan, the consultant made me put a deadline on each thing, you know what I mean? So like a quarter and a year that I had to get it done, so that I knew, if I was overdue on doing something or whatever, so in every board meeting that I have, I report on where I am on that plan, if I'm delayed on some things or I've done, and it's actually very fulfilling to go back and say, well, we did do a bunch of stuff, we're not doing this, it's just, and so I can share my format with you if you want. And if you want more stuff, I can send you all kinds of random things.
Feel free.
Logan, you might be sorry that you said that. But and then what was my other thing? I can't remember. Being on those federal impact calls, if anybody's joined those are to me, I feel like, and of course they have come up because of all the nightmares around, the Trump administration and the funding scares and all that stuff, all of that. And but those are like some, statewide entities that have a lot of really good information that I feel like our group would benefit by, from seeing at least the notes from those meetings with all of the different links and the opportunity to advocate. So if I were going to add anything to this, and I don't know where it would go, I would say that we have a role, and maybe you guys have a legal reason to argue with me, that we need to have an advocacy arm we do. TJPDC has the one guy, that does all of the, the lobbying, that part of it is what could we do as individuals locally and statewide to, advocate for the stuff that we need to advocate for. I feel like that's something that I don't do enough of.
Those are very interesting thoughts. Yeah. The federal impact calls, I think, have been really interesting and useful for people. And yeah, but I don't disagree that would be a great thing to incorporate somehow into our meetings. Also, the intersection, like you said, with turning that into an advocacy opportunity, I guess.
Yeah, the advocacy conversation probably always makes Christine's face twitch a little bit underneath the PDC in total, because while David is doing advocacy, he has regional things that he advocates for. That's a regional legislative packet, but then he also does some lobbying on behalf of the 6 counties that are individual to each of those counties. The commission signs off on that regional packet, but the regional commission does not really get into, Albemarle is not commenting on what Fluvanna is necessarily advocating for or against. It's just a delicate balance to be aware of. I think the other thing to think about, talking about a strategic plan, on that last page, it talked about funding, or what was your bullet point, Logan?
Which one?
Diversifying funding.
Yeah, that's in here somewhere. Yeah.
There it is. So diversifying the funding stream, like you were saying, Margaret, and I agree. I think we could all come up with a lot more things to do. Then that requires additional funding if we're going to call on staff to help us to do that. So we are limited in some of the things that we can do based on that annual budget. And we've frankly never really just got into, are we going to charge folks? Are we going to fundraise? What are we going to do in terms of that? The last consultant was trying to put together what a dues-based or a pay-to-play kind of piece would be. At the time, the executive committee wasn't real enthused about going that route. But there will always be that limitation until we figure out how to basically increase funding, which will allow us to increase what we can ask staff to do for us. And I'm not saying that as a pro or anything. I think we should throw it all on the table. Then maybe that's what motivates us to figure out how to get after the funding. But because to your point, Margaret, like if somebody doesn't see the value in something just to engage with it, well, they're certainly not going to want to pay for it. So there's some underlying work that has to be done to achieve that. I like that Alice had said, and I think you could use these slides. If maybe that's a good idea when we open this up to the full partnership, is each of these slides in review, we could track the to date or the update for each bullet point.
Yeah.
With where we're at, and call it an ongoing or an achieved or a, no progress kind of thing. I think that would be very helpful in helping steer where we're going to go with this. Sorry to just throw my quick commentary out there on what I'd heard so far. Other thoughts and ideas on where we want to take this?
So talking about the advocacy, which I think is very integrated with finding other revenue sources. You guys know Overton McGee lives in Fluvanna County, right? And he's been doing a lot of lobbying. Not just him, but maybe others, but bringing some of those people together to help educate us on where we could put some concentrated efforts, maybe bring us up to date, have a running information session at each of these meetings as to what's happening in Richmond that directly affects us, what's coming down the pike, where things are moving, reaching out to some of our local resources who have, like Overton, who has a stake in this area. I know he's been very helpful to me individually, and I think he's, just very helpful to the whole region in affordable housing. So we have some untapped resources that are advocates for us that we ought to be pulling into this particular discussion.
Yeah, David will put out as part of the commission newsletter summary updates because things move so damn fast down there that you could like yesterday, HB 804, which would probably be a very relevant House bill for this body to be thinking about. And it's really got two bills embedded in one because he's got a pullout. This is, I forgot the sponsor's name, but he's got a separate bill for it. But this would require localities to come up with a housing plan that increases their stock by 7.5%, makes it basically by right that you can do up to a certain percentage of commercial business owning as residential. And then the other part would move it from where, like, let's say a rezoning comes in and it gets denied in Albemarle, that they could appeal it at your Board of Zoning Appeals, which is a whole nother kit and caboodle. But it would definitely be taking a knock at local control. At one level, as a housing advocate, you would say, well, I think this is good. It require more units, but so without going off on a tangent on that particular bill, to the point, having those kind of discussions, I think the regional housing partnership's a good place to do that. Because then you would hear, because I know how Fluvanna would react to this bill, or versus how a Charlottesville would. And under our footprint, understanding that dynamic, I think it's important for us to figure out how do we engage folks without their worry of, are we advocating for something that they're not necessarily for? How would we work together with each other where I might be an anti-growth or a slow growth county, and on the other end have a really pro. So how could, as a partnership, how do we support both entities with their own individual vision? And that's been tricky.
That's come up at the last two Board of Supervisors meetings for both Fluvanna and Louisa, and the supervisors are recognizing that their slowing growth and affordability are at odds with each other, and they've actually made comment to that themselves. So this is a great area to have those conversations, and I'd love to see more government engagement here as well. Ned, I know you're here, but my my local governments don't often show up to these. So for either county, and I bring it up and mention it to them, but I haven't been able to get their engagement to hear some of this. So I think bringing in some relevant topics for them like that would be really helpful, and let them have a voice and a seat at the table and help us figure out what would be best for each of these communities.
It would be interesting to have, from an informational perspective, like one of those presentations be like a roundtable of governmental entities, from the region who want to talk about something like that. Well, what about this bill? How does it affect us? And then just have them talk to each other about it. And I mean, I think you would have a lot of people wanting to hear that. So, I mean, that might take staff time, might take money, whatever. But if it's valuable conversations that we're having and where we're providing just the information and it's not necessarily doesn't have a spin on it, from any one particular way, or like, this is the information that you need. You advocate the way you and your locality or whatever, feels like it's, like, or individually how you feel like you should advocate, but this is the information. Bless you.
I'm
Sorry.
going to echo all those comments that it is really eye-opening, the amount of work that's being done in Richmond. But creating an advocacy group as deciding one voice, that's a tremendous undertaking. And I see it. We are growing it in a county in West Virginia from a grassroots, and as an organization trying to decide what we're going to be for and against with towing a very cautious line. It takes a tremendous amount of work and hours and hours and hours of looking at bills and reading bills and getting stakeholders to comment, and then coming up with the agreed upon pro, for, or no comment. So I think education in this space would be amazing to understand what's going on in Richmond. But I think advocacy in the sense that this is what we're going to stand for, takes on a whole different ball of wax and lots and lots and lots of staff time while in session.
Sorry, Alice. And maybe clarify if I'm wrong. At least from where I was coming from, I wasn't talking about advocacy from the CVRHP, but us being more knowledgeable about the advocacy that is happening. But please correct me if I misunderstood.
No, I was just giving everyone the cautionary tale that I agree with you, Kim. Keep getting educated while it's happening, and then especially as soon as it's done, rather than waiting until it's signed by the governor months later, that as soon as it's passed, having those people come in and give us an update on everything that was passed is invaluable. But having a voice is tougher.
Yeah, this is Ruth. I will also just chime in and remind everyone that the CVRHP is an advisory body to the TJPDC Commission. And so if this body were to take a stand on anything, that would mean that it's a stand of the TJPDC Commission, and we could not do that without their permission. And that would also mean that the entire region was taking that stand as well. So we'd want to be incredibly cautious, but if advocacy was the route we were going to go down for this organization, I would strongly push for considering nonprofit status instead of being an advisory board.
Kind of going down that road, have we ever had any of our state house members or Senate members come speak to this group?
Yeah, we had Sally Hudson come and speak a couple years ago when she was an elected official. I don't think we've had anyone more recently than that. But that's a great
Didn't
idea.
you have
Just
Amy
a
Loffer
thought.
come, I thought?
Oh yeah, we did. You're right. But I'll have Emily see what we can come up with.
Yeah, we have sometimes like the idea where there was, well, with Sally, each county will, or in the city will do a legislative session with their local electeds. So it was kind of a similar thing to have them to have the chance to come here, do a similar type piece, but focused on the issue, not on everything they're doing. I always think when you can get your state leaders in on something, I think that's I think that's a way to engage people.
Yeah, it
To the
gives them
point
an
earlier,
opportunity, yeah, to hear
yeah.
what we're doing firsthand.
And even just like somebody had mentioned earlier, I'm forgetting who, but you just get your local electeds together and start having them talk and discuss it is an engaging thing because everybody kind of hears. And it's not even so much because of like, well, who's this, that, or whatever, but you can get an idea of understanding and, oh, well, this is how Nelson kind of thinks about this. This is how Albemarle, and it drives kind of work, whether it's a private sector or for profit, of how to approach those counties. So I think, yeah, for sure, definitely valuable. And I understand staff is always probably going to use the phrase, sorry to pick on you, Ruth, incredibly cautious. I guess I would change it to incredibly mindful. The commissioners are more open-minded than I think sometimes we give them credit for. But at that level, at that big umbrella level, sometimes I think it's just a worry of our rural counties that the PDC can become very Charlottesville, Albemarle centric. And that's also the political dynamic because Charlottesville and Albemarle tends to be a little bit more in line politically than the other four counties are. So it's just, that's the thing to be mindful of. And I think at the commission, with the current commissioners that sit there, all understand that balance, and we get along great, and we talk, and are open to hearing ideas, and are not afraid to then exchange. I just think sometimes, like at this body, not so much the MPO, but maybe like I feel like that's a piece that CART is missing because it is so Charlottesville Albemarle right now that the rest of them have something to say about it that's useful and valuable. And they'll be open to it. So I would like to see more because the folks that are on the partnership from the outlying counties are different than the members that sit on the commission. So the representatives from all of the places don't exactly align with that. The upside is that your members from those bodies that aren't on the partnership are getting updates from myself, and Keith is on the commission. So a lot of times we'll talk about some stuff from the RHP when we do our roundtable at the commission level. So there's an opportunity at the partnership, if we got those other local electeds engaged through us, that you're really engaging 4 people from your county as opposed to 2. But I mean, with an elected, I definitely get it. If elected does not see the value or the purpose, it's hard to prioritize the time to something that they might not fully understand or judge or just, whatever. You have to kind of change their mind on it. What other things should we discuss in terms of working through this strategic plan and what we're going to focus on?
From a staff perspective, I want to just throw out and remind everyone who either is aware, maybe is unaware, our economic development regional strategy includes housing, affordable housing as a goal. And that was an agreed upon goal for the entire region, not just for the urban areas. And I feel like that's particularly relevant because we have someone from the Workforce Development Board sitting on the RHP as well. And there are economic development grants that are untapped.
I would also add from a staffing perspective, I don't know if this is the right place to do it because, I'm reading through all those different goals, those 4 different areas, and I think there's a lot the RHP could be doing, I think, in a resource, I don't love the phrase resource constrained because I think that's a self-set constraint, but in a resource constrained environment, I think we really need to listen to the membership on what is valuable, and hearing that the webinar series, that what's happening at the state and the federal level is very valuable, that the summit is very valuable, that in-person event is, we put a lot of the resource and the time into those things, you know, and the topics are determined by the stuff that we're talking about right now, you know, like there needs to be, like, I'm thinking of, gosh, we're only, I don't know, 14, 16 months away from the next in-person summit, and that is no small undertaking. And when we start to think about bringing in diverse resources for the RHP just operationally, it's generally the same partners that we're reaching out to as sponsorships for those events. And so perhaps in diversifying, what we really need to do is we need to put a lot of eggs in the basket of these information sharing, you know, legislation sharing, webinars building up to that annual event, because around the same time as the event is the study will be completed. So that will also be a major focus of that next summit. So I think in my mind, I'm thinking it's really important to redefine the strategic plan and the work program, but I think we need to make sure we're funneling it into what's coming up in the next 12, 18 months as far as required staff time anyway, and making sure that those things all align together. I think that's a really long-winded way of saying not be too ambitious with the work plan, since there are already things that are going to be essential components of that work plan.
Yeah, my reaction, I appreciate that. My reaction to that is that, like, that summit that we do every 2 years is probably the most impactful thing we do. People come out of that enjoying the content, the networking, all of the above. So maybe that's the strategic plan. As I look at things like amplifying messaging, engaging stakeholders, you build all your other months around that.
And part of the staff resources in the short term is making sure we're sending staff to these, you know, federal calls, going to Richmond, educating themselves so they can educate the partnership, you know, researching what Overton is doing, making sure we're following what Housing Forward is already doing on an advocacy basis, you know, and really using that staff time to be pushing things out to the membership in preparation for these webinar series, whatever we're calling them, lunch and learns, and that annual summit. I think that's where there's a little bit of a rub, is how much time do we put in to that for staff versus accomplishing these, you know, tasks within the strategic plan, you know, like collating resources, like things like that.
Yep. I think that's good. And I think it would, to your point about sponsorships, if we're doing more, if you're able to connect the thread, both the lead up to and then the come out of, and then what you do in the off year between the summits, you could build a value proposition to more sponsors where, like, the approach so far on the summit has been cover your costs as best you can. And this past year we did that. But I'm of the mind that we should be able to make money on the summit. So it's not just about covering the costs of the summit. It can be about putting those resources towards the other work in between the summits, if you would. But that if you don't have the through line, then it would be hard to pitch that on sponsors, beyond just knowing that they're contributing to the summit itself. But there are some new players in town that I think would be interested in sponsoring and could open up some new dollar values to us on that. I also think, as part of it, that we have to figure out, I wonder, do we have a handle on what's duplicated out there? I just saw that Carr and their new foundation is going to start doing lunch and learns. It's like, well, if they're doing lunch and learns on affordable housing, do we need to be doing lunch and learns on affordable housing? Where if we're doing presentations that are a little bit broader, like we've been doing at our quarterly meeting, I'm sure there are other things out there. Now, I don't know if their lunch and learns are open to everybody or just the realtors, or how that works yet. I think that's them getting up and running. But
I think that could be an opportunity for us to intersect with CAR a bit more. I imagine their topics are going to be different than ours. However, if we could help them with a topic to help people with affordable housing, how do you reach this segment of the population? What resources are available? Who has Spark funds? How do you access those? What type of down payment assistance programs are available? How does PHA play a role in HUD certified counseling? Like we can offer to help them with one of those. That gives us an extra arm out there in a different set of people that we could reach. But I would doubt they're going to be duplicating our efforts.
Well, that's a good point. Right.
Yeah, Charlottesville Tomorrow has a pretty comprehensive housing resource guide on their website now that is a bit duplicative of something one of our previous vistas did.
And I mean, some folks do just work there's stuff that's popping up with the unhoused population right now where for folks that have been working in the space or been dealing with that issue for a handful of years, they're hearing some folks who are new to the topic or new to the urgency of it, which is great. It's great to have new energy, but sometimes, just because you're new to the idea, don't act like nothing's been done or nothing's been happening.
We have encountered a ton of that, Ned. Yeah, that's a great point. We had a group come together in Louisa that was the Homeless Coalition, but it's a good messaging point for us that housing and homelessness are two topics.
Mm-hmm.
And they're two completely different silos. They intersect, but that is a whole conversation.
Right. Let me do it. So just in interest of time, staff, Logan, Ruth, do you have feedback that gives us something to work on and toward for the quarterly meeting?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like we got some good info from all of that. And particularly for the next meeting, I'll take a stab at these slides, basically enumerating things we've done in the interest of illustrating those points out, just so people know where we stand.
And what I might suggest, Logan, understood, because then it would be kind of like, here's where we're at, like a brief status point on each item.
Yeah.
But then maybe in the same type of thing, like one bullet's the status update, but if something that we've discussed today was captured under one of those current bullet points, you could throw that in there. Executive committee discussed, so we could see on one slide, this is where we're at. This seemed to be of interest from the executive committee. It may help with the expanded discussion.
Got it. Good point.
Any final items on this particular one? Do a check on my time. I've not been. Oh, we got plenty of time. If not, then I'll move to item 5B, which is leadership succession discussion. Very formal sounding agenda item. What the board and the committee needs, or what the executive committee needs to decide, in other boards, there are usually some sort of process that the committee or the board or something would go through to determine who your new leadership will be. So the reality for this group is that since its inception, either myself or Keith has been chair and or vice chair. And we've flipped that back and forth a few times, where he was initial chair, I was vice chair, and then we've traded. We then went to the bylaws, switched the bylaws, which allowed for more than a 1-year term, but we term limited it. So Keith, if you probably, I believe he announced it to this group, Keith is leaving all commission functions come the end of the fiscal year. So he will no longer be involved at the commission level or the partnership level. So he's stepping back from some of the things that he's doing. And then, so he's the current vice chair. Myself as chair, I'll be term limited to continue as chair after June 30. So I'll give you like what the commission does. The commission has a 1-year chair, 1-year vice chair. The commission does a nominating committee. So 3 members to include the current chair get together and they figure out a slate, and then they bring that forward and the commission votes on the slate. So that's like one process. The other process, you don't need a committee. We can just do it. The executive committee can be the nominating committee, where we start to decide who is going to be the next chair and vice chair. And there's, like I said, if we need to find other processes, I guess we could probably come up with those. Some bodies just wait until that meeting where you're leadershipless and then just have the conversation then and there. I would prefer as a body to just have it ready so that it can be voted on prior to the fiscal year turnover, so that the executive committee can go to the full partnership meeting in June, because the full partnership would have to, am I correct on that, Ruth? The full partnership votes on the chair and vice chair and the executive committee members.
That is correct.
So the June partnership meeting is when the folks would take votes for this. We'll have a chance to meet as an executive committee again between the March meeting and that June meeting. So that's when we'd want to kind of iron this out. So today it's more about discussing what the process or what you all feel like the process would be. It was also a time for me to be able to throw out there interest levels for both current sitting members. With Keith stepping away, we'll have to find who is going to fill his slot on the executive committee, regardless of leadership. So there's just things like that the full partnership is going to look to us for guidance and a recommendation on. So when we walk into the June full partnership meeting, we want to say the executive committee recommends X, Y, and Z. And then, I think Greg, I always think of Greg Powell. He was of the mind, look, it's time for some new blood, some fresh interest, etc., and saw turnover as a good thing. So it's also an opportunity for some things like that to be discussed and thought about. All right. So all that to say, we don't have to figure out who's going to be what and any of that, but we should discuss how do we want the process to play out, so that by the time when we meet when we meet the next time as an executive committee, we can say, here's what we think, because that will be the lead into the June meeting. So I'll stop there and hear any reactions.
And just to be clear, the nominations can be from anyone on the partnership currently, correct?
The partnership, yeah, and it would just be twofold. So if there was somebody on the full partnership, they'd have to be appointed to the executive committee.
And the executive committee, correct.
Right.
Okay.
So I think that's how it played out initially, like as the body was coming to be formed, like all the executive committee got in, and then there was already talk of who the leadership would be initially.
But I also like the idea of, fresh blood too, kind of coming in, to the partnership. And maybe it's possible for everyone to bring a recommendation that then gets, discussed, perhaps.
Yep. I hear, when I hear talk of, so obviously having been in one of the two roles over the years, you get a lot of direct and indirect feedback about how things are going. One of them we just discussed today was engagement by some electeds. So the body might want to think about, do we want another, one or two or trying to get one or two more electeds onto the executive committee, not necessarily for chair or vice chair, but just to help with the engagement in the bigger effort. I think what we can do, I didn't think about preparing that for today. Like I know Alice, I think Will replaced Greg, I believe. I don't recall any other electeds being on here on the executive committee since I've been on. That's just me working from memory. Of course, we just had the changeover at UVA. And then Margaret has been, whether she's been the actual appointee or the alternate, has been pretty engaged since the start. And Kim as well. So it's just, I think it's a good time to have that conversation, of who else could be involved. Emily is from legal aid, and I'm forgetting what that exact appointment is. And then Keith was from the commission, and Keith played the biggest role in getting this body even up and running.
Emily Dreyfus serves as the citizen representative.
Citizen rep. Okay. Thank you, Ruth.
I know I'm, representing the university, but I'd love to see somebody from the School of Architecture because they are, at a different kind of research level and they're engaged in communities, nationally. If you're interested in finding if you're interested in my exploring that.
I would say that and/or economic development. I don't think we have economic development. I don't think that's one we would have thought of 5 or 6 years ago. But to the point that was made earlier about the grants that are out there, but for the last 3 years running at both the VACO, the Virginia Association of County level, and the National Association County level, you don't often hear any conversations about economic development anymore without hearing about housing. So I think locally we should tap into that. And I think, I'm not trying to speak for UVA, but my understanding is, with your housing projects, once you go out into it, it's like that's where sometimes that world comes to the forefront beyond just it'd be tough enough just doing a housing development, but then when you're trying to figure out all the other components in a multi-use and how to fit in affordable housing, it can become quickly intertwined.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And I'm not ready to say we need to grow the size of the executive committee. The point of the executive committee was to be very manageable. It makes for easier for quorum and all of that. But if we really do scrutinize that there's a missing element that needs a different appointee to it, then that would be a valid reason to invite a new participant onto the committee.
I would also add that if there is consideration for changing the makeup, it would be valuable to review the bylaws because the bylaws do state that membership by type. So it says there are 7 members and they serve in these roles. And so if that's something that you all want to reevaluate or make recommendations to the full partnership to change that, it would be a bylaws revision.
And I think right now it would be just opinion. Focusing on the leadership change, I think that in and of itself is going to be a big deal because there will be new blood no matter what. The fact that we've been trying to encourage folks to be involved with the advisory committee is a good way to invite some of those missing pieces initially and see if once they're maybe attending and reacting and listening in, then to invite them from there onto the partnership or the executive committee would be a good way to go about that. That takes some effort. I'm discovering I've had a lot of folks that I've talked to about being on the advisory committee, and they're all reacting well to it. But the actual logistics of making that happen and what that means is what is proving to be an interesting dilemma. It's not like you can say, "Hey, you have to attend this meeting." The whole point was like you don't have to. So then it becomes an interesting thing. So any thoughts on, I don't think we need a nominating committee. I think this body can be the nominating committee. Are you all comfortable with that as a process? And then I would just ask that if, and I'm happy to have one-on-one conversations. Sometimes when you're considering a leadership role or what have you, you can talk about, what's the time commitment outside of the meeting. Things like that. And that's just my experience chairing different committees. I'm happy to discuss what that means, like pre-agenda. And obviously you can reach out to staff as well and get their thoughts. I will say just right now that the time commitment over and beyond the actual meetings is not substantial. Beyond the pre-agendas, Logan, Ruth, usually 30 minutes. I think we're in a good cadence now because we've been thinking 2 partnership meetings ahead in terms of who is going to present and be on the agenda. And then, outside of that, there was a point where Keith and I were going and doing presentations to some of the local bodies. So that added some time. We've not done that in a few years. So things like that could come up or may come up, coffees here and there, or phone calls, but it is not a large time commitment outside of the actual meeting times that we're all committed to already. Any questions or comments? So then I will say that at our next executive committee meeting, what would that be, Ruth? April?
Yep, it's in April, the
I would,
April 22nd.
I think that if we could identify folks from the current executive committee or partnership, we can start exploring, so we can announce this in March as well at the full partnership. But for those who may be interested in the chair and or vice chair, we can say so and be ready to start talking names in April. And then the executive committee, if we've got 6 people that are interested in 2 spots, then we'll just have to go through the work of who we think the slate should be. And we can do that. Do we have to do, Christine or Ruth, remind me, like I know that, yeah, the nominating committee for the TJPDC meets in public. So yeah, so any conversation about that would have to happen in public. I mean, we can all have one-on-one conversations as we need to, but
Yeah, you can do one-on-ones.
But the executive committee, if we do have multiple people, we'll have to discuss, just be ready to discuss that in public as required. Great. Heard no objection to that as an approach, so I think we'll be good to go. And you're all welcome to make recommendations to one another as well, if you'd like. Old Business Advisory Committee update. This was just Logan, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was an update that it's out there and that
Yeah,
we're trying to get participation.
that's mostly it. I know a couple folks had issues with editing it, the spreadsheet that has all the list of organizations and things. Alice, I know we talked about this. So I think I fixed that issue. And I'll resend out the spreadsheet link just so everyone can have it renewed in their memories. But yeah, I've reached out to a few organizations. I think we're starting to get folks adding some things on there. So please keep if you know folks who would like to be sort of in the wider orbit of things. Again, this is, the idea of this is to sort of have this loose group of contacts who, we can call upon for advice on things, to advise us on, a wider, to capture a wider swath than perhaps we have represented, with the membership in the RHP. So it doesn't have to be necessarily explicitly housing related. We've got transit, jaunt, things like that can be in this sort of wider orbit of our organization. Yeah, that's the spiel. Anyway.
And when they join, do they get, then are they added to the email list? So would they see when either the executive committee and or partnership are meeting that they're notified about that?
Yes, that's the plan, is to sort of keep people in the email communication of things. Though recognizing that they're not, members in the partnership and their participation would be different. But yes, that's, unless there's another, Ruth, unless you have thoughts other than that.
I was just thinking how we maybe should talk about our mailing list serve offline.
All right, good deal.
And excuse me, the next item is the webinar series update. Emily?
Yes. So, as we were talking about earlier, there's going to be another Lunch and Learn series this winter. I've been reaching out to organizations about the kind of overarching theme of this is to focus on innovations in different aspects of housing, similar to the Lotus campaign that came in the December meeting. We are trying to get organizations that have been really successful at something kind of unique. So that should start up late February, I would say. We're still kind of locking down the dates, but there's been a good amount of interest.
Great. And we do have the March partnership presentation
Yes.
lined up, right?
Yes,
Do we have, go ahead.
Oh, that will be Benjamin Price or Priest from the National Housing Crisis Task Force. They are a big research organization focused on housing crisis and supply.
Great. And do we have a local? We've been kind of doing a larger one and then a more localized presentation. We just haven't done pre-agenda. I could wait till then.
Yeah, I've spoken with Dan from Habitat about speaking. So I think he's
That's
on
right.
board for that.
You did mention that the last time. Got it. I would throw out there and I don't know if Ruth or Christine can help with this, but even if it's not a presentation, I guess two points. Does the partnership receive David's summary, the legislative updates that he sends out to everybody?
I think that's a different mailing list.
And we can talk about it more offline if it creates trouble, but I wonder if having the RHP on that summary update, just based on some of the earlier conversation today, might go a long way in providing information. So I'll throw that out there.
Yeah.
But for the March partnership, having, even if it's a packet item, where you could read through a summary, because by that point, a lot of this stuff will be said and done.
Yeah,
David and I
had actually discussed, I think I gave like maybe it was December or I can't remember when, a brief sort of overview after talking with him. But when we had discussed previously, he said he would be willing to speak to the body. So I haven't talked to him directly about the date. But if there's a conflict, we can get him to, add his input for us for that meeting.
Great. Awesome. All right. And I had one other item I was thinking about and I've forgotten it. So now we're at the round table. So I'm just going to move around there. So I'll go with, I've got both Alice's ready to go. Alice Fletcher, I'll start with you.
All right. Well, things are going great in Fluvanna. It's been the Coves are doing well, but also wanted to give a shout out that the ULI is having their Jeffries, which on February 26th, and that celebrates the best developments in the area in 2025. And we did throw the Coves in the list. Now I don't know if we'll win, but they celebrate affordable housing, commercial, unique design, and so if that's on anybody's radar, it's always a great event.
And it wants a statue of Thomas Jefferson, for instance. That's what that was. That was a Jeffy.
Awesome. You got the mic there, Alice, so go ahead.
No problem. I just have frustrating news at the moment, which is our affordable housing projects at Wortland and 10th primarily is stuck at the moment just because there's a significant funding gap that we're trying to explore. I think our consultants, POA, Preservation of Affordable Housing, is going back and making a new submission for the 9% tax credits this spring. The university is bringing on a consultant named Philip Brooks, who has kind of a long history of creatively financing or creatively developing capital stacks for affordable housing. And so he's going to come on and give us some fresh eyes as to what the possibilities are. So stay tuned. We're really hopeful that we can kind of get off, this stuck position we're in, but that's where we are. The foundation, though, is moving forward with their housing project up at North Fork, which they're moving forward first with the affordable housing component. They're a mix of market rate and affordable units, but they're moving forward first with the affordable section.
Have they determined what their mix is going to be?
I think they did, but I don't have that information. I can bring that to the partnership next time.
That'd be great. That was a big point when they came forward for the approval. So I would just
Yeah,
not that you're the foundation, but I would point the foundation back to that evening when they received a positive vote.
got it. I'll come prepared with that information. I will say that our student housing project is going well. So we are expecting 780 beds on grounds in the summer of 2027, and as well as 350 beds up at Darden for graduate housing, also in fall of 2027. So, that's over 1,000 or more than 1,000 beds for the university. And then, of course, there's the Verve and up campus. So all told, I think in fall 2027, we're going to have, close to 3,000 beds for students. So I'm really interested in seeing what impact that has on the neighborhoods. That's it.
Awesome. Kim, I'm just going across the screen here.
Hey, we are working on our infrastructure for our 25 unit development in Louisa. Currently boring under the railroad tracks and we've hit rocks, so we're having loads of fun with that. We have funding in place for the first 4 one-bedroom units, and those are set. And then we have financing pulled together for the next 9 two-bedroom units. We did not get awarded DHCD ASNH funding for the remaining 12 one-bedroom units. We will be talking to DHCD about why that application didn't satisfy their criteria. I largely suspect that it's the small size of the project, which Margaret and I have talked about this, just the scope of projects that we're able to do to satisfy or help satisfy affordable housing in the rural areas is not anywhere near the volume of units we see in the urban areas. And Virginia Housing is helping to, coming forth with some funding for us on the workforce development units. But DHCD, I think, has a harder time embracing what the rural areas need. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that conversation. I think also the lack of county support for it, and I mean financial support, not they voted for it. They've pushed this through so that we can get it built. They're highly supportive of it. We've had unanimous decisions on everything from rezoning to putting the development in and approval on the final plan. But they have not contributed towards the immense infrastructure lift that is required for this project or any of the affordable housing. So they are recognizing that. And at the last Board of Supervisors meeting I attended, we discussed that the county would be interested in perhaps contributing. So for those who are familiar with Louisa County's history with that, that's huge. We're really glad they're being very supportive. We've worked very hard to gain their trust that we are here to collaborate with the county. We're not a nonprofit that's veering off doing our own thing. We have our own agenda. We work in concert with our counties, which I think has been helpful. There's been this strong push-pull between the counties and nonprofits before, and they're finally starting to recognize that we can assist with some of the taxpayer burden and actually help the counties out. So I'm hoping they will help contribute to that. And then in the next application cycle, we'll be awarded some DHCD funds to finish out that project. And we've,
Awesome.
yeah, we're still, Logan, we're still doing HPG projects and lots of repair projects, but the funding is just not there. Logan knows funding for HPG was cut, and Christine knows, dramatically this year. So it went from like 189,000 to 60,000 for all the counties to share. And the Fluvanna Louisa Housing Foundation has been a high utilizer of those funds. So like last year, I think we used 105,000. We've we've definitely got a good formula worked out to utilize those funds, but now they're drastically reduced. We did get some smaller repair grants to help satisfy some of that need, but it's not going to fulfill sort of our formula to help people severely reduce the cost of major home repairs and keep them in their homes and reduce the number of people who end up homeless. So glad to work with you guys on any other solutions we might have for that. And thank you for your support on that.
Awesome. Thank you. Quick bullets on Albemarle. You may have seen some emails that our applications are out for the Affordable Housing Investment Fund applications in our county. That closes Saturday. It's been out for the last couple of weeks. That investment, that's the piece I forgot earlier. I don't know if anybody, Christine or Ruth or Logan, you'd mentioned there were economic development, or somebody mentioned there were some economic development grants out there. I don't know if the work UVA is doing would be open to that, or would be something they could look at. Since they're having a funding gap issue, I just don't know if sometimes the 100% affordable projects with everything that's involved aren't available in those, depending on the grant, but some of the economic development grants might be open outside of the regular housing ones. But I can't remember if the one from the state that we got presented on a few months ago is still even open at this point. Yeah.
It closed.
I wonder how many people actually took advantage of that, because the available funding, if they could turn around and reopen it or figure something out, that was a pretty lenient grant from a qualifying standpoint.
Yeah, they actually did tell us that if there was a compelling case, that they might be willing to consider a project after the fact. So Alice, it might be worthwhile
it was around employment, and it had nothing to do with so for example, the one in Albemarle I immediately thought of was opening up the new school that we're building down by Monticello High School. Would have been a qualifying event, and because it was adding jobs. And then anybody within a 30-minute drive could apply for it. So Greene County or Fluvanna County could apply for the grant based off of that school being built in Albemarle. So that was kind of some of the leniency. So I don't know if there's anything out there in the economic development world that might help that project.
Can I that information, Ruth?
Yeah, we can talk offline. That'd be great.
Thanks.
And we approved AC 44, our comprehensive plan, back in the fall. One of the things that it was immediately called for was a scrutiny of and an update of housing Albemarle as a high priority. It calls for it to be reviewed every 5 years in the comp plan, but prior to the vote, I advocated that be an immediate go-to, to not wait a year to do it, specifically than our targets, because we're just not seeing very many applications coming through. And they're, without adding commentary as to the what's, whys, or the opinions on it, it just needs to be looked at. So that will be a chance for housing advocates and others to provide input or thoughts on housing Albemarle once that gets relooked at. We had a joint meeting with our school board back in December. I won't go into the content of that joint meeting, but one of the takeaways or the directives given to both our county executive and the superintendent was to engage with Weldon Cooper to do a more involved or nuanced data study to inform decisions in the county, such as, do we need a new high school? So that was the premise or the context of where this came from. But beyond a high school, if we do a better job of predicting or dealing with housing data, it informs just about every decision we make in the county, from police staffing to where should we put an urban park to, where are the demands on student enrollment? What could we foresee when somebody like an AstraZeneca decides to come to the county? So I think this is something that in the housing space in particular could be pretty valuable for folks. Like in Greene, I know they require like a financial analysis when applications come in. So it's getting at things that are a little bit more nuanced. So in addition to that will be coming down the pike, we've been looking at both development area analysis and coming up with a scorecard so that when applications come before us, if we make a decision and we don't improve full density, what does that mean for the remainder of the development area and the future of perhaps expansion, et cetera? So we're starting to get first looks at that. So you'll see a little different animal coming forward with rezoning kind of requests or special use permit requests in the county. And then if you live in our county, you know that your property values went up depending on where you live. I can't speak to it, but on average, it was countywide, that was 6.1%, 6.15%, if I'm remembering right. So we've seen another bit of growth. The highest growth, 8, 9, 10% level, were for homes in the $1 million plus area. Average sale price, I think I saw reported, was 700,000 now in Albemarle. And we have a white light hot market for $1 million, $2 million plus homes in the county. It's been reported in, what was it? I think it was called Mansion Magazine. I read back in the fall about how strong the housing market is for these ultra kind of luxury homes. But Albemarle is quick becoming where $1 million home was the home that you used to think was the $500,000 home just a few years ago. So just throwing that out there as information. And we're coming up to our budget, as all the counties are. So I know for advocates out there for trying to get dollars from the counties and or the city, that all the either county managers or city managers will be making their presentations to the legislative bodies here coming up over the next probably 4 weeks, and then we'll be in budget season. So just encourage folks to be out and about, and send word to us if you so desire. I think that's all I've got in Albemarle, unless there's any questions. I closed the agenda, but that was roundtable, so there shouldn't be anything else. So in the interest of being 2:30, any other quick items?
I have the mix for North Fork if you're interested in hearing that quickly.
I would love to hear that, yeah.
So the current plan shows them adding 120 senior living units out of the gate, all at 60% and below. And then beyond that, they have 60 to 80% units in phase 1. So that's roughly 200 total units. Those numbers are subject to change, but that's the plan at the moment.
Was that the percentage of units or the AMI percentage?
I think it's AMI.
So the
So
units.
200 total units in phase 1 are 60 to 80% AMI, which is why they're going first out with the affordable units. Those are not the market rate units.
So 120 of the 200 are devoted to seniors?
No, 120 is separate. So I think it's probably 320 total.
Gotcha. And then it's a mix in the 200 on the AMI level.
Correct.
And they got approved, I think, for like around 1,400.
Yeah, but this is just phase 1.
Yep. Awesome.
But I'll have more.
The senior units at
robust
60% is reason to put your hands up and say touchdown on that, because that is a huge press right now, especially in Albemarle.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that.
All right.
Any other items? Awesome. Thank you, staff. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day in the ice and the snow.
Thank
we
you
are
all.
adjourned.
Stay safe.
Thank you.